Hey, this is Forecast Year here reporting in on August 20th, 2014 about the situation in Ebola. As we predicted earlier back in mid-July, we believe that this situation would escalate dramatically. And there were a few caveats that we put on it as to when they would turn this epidemic, which is turning into a pandemic, around. One of them is that they would have to quarantine entire villages and entire communities where Ebola had had an outbreak, whether or not those people were sick or not. So everybody, the sick and the unsick, would be all just lumped together. And this would be basically the drastic measures we talked about. And unfortunately, they're having to do these drastic measures. I don't think they're going far enough at this point to really contain it. The only good news right now is that Gambia, one of the first places that had the Ebola outbreak, has actually turned a corner, and they look like they've actually been able to contain this thing. We're looking at a plot here of the death toll and the cumulative cases on Ebola up to last week. That's the 13th of August. This is a BBC report. This is a very telling chart. If you look at this death toll chart and this impact chart, you see Liberia here. This green line is rocketed up. They've got a very difficult economic situation. It's unfortunately a very hard hit country. Is fairly impoverished. Doubly unfortunate because it's supposed to be a close friend of America. There's a lot of Liberia was liberated slaves from America. Many of them were returned back to when they returned to Africa after the Civil War. And Monrovia was named after President Monroe. That's the capital is Monrovia. So I mean, there's an important connection there between America's history and Liberia. So I think as Americans, we have an extra special duty to be extra concerned. We have a concern for all of our global neighbors, but especially ones that have a historical connection to our country. Anyhow, so Liberia is really hard hit. I mean, it looks like it's rocketing up like crazy. Keep an eye on charts like this. They are really telling the story about where this thing's headed, and it's not in a good direction. Again, the only one that seems like it's slowing down any is Guinea, and that's even still rising in Guinea. It looked like they had almost contained it, like it had flatlined, but it's still going up a little bit. If they can get this thing turned around in Guinea, that'd be really good news on this thing, and that would be a case study about how potentially this thing can be contained long term. So keep an eye on what's going on in Guinea. This situation in West Point, which is part of Monrovia, is an incredibly poor neighborhood. They've got approximately this 75,000 people, one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in Monrovia. Environmental degradation. Look at this. It's ripe for an Ebola problem. Lack of proper sanitation. Problem with toilets and people defecating in public. I mean, that's a disaster. What does this mean? They've got the army and the military are in there, and they have cordoned this area off. It's like a death zone for the people that live there. And there's a bunch of them. There's 75,000. What do you think is going to happen long term? They're going to run out of food. They're going to be sick. Ebola is going to shoot through this area like crazy. And there was a big clash when the military went in to pull out to do an extraction of a government official and their family out of this area. They rescued out some government people, and everyone else there pretty much left to die. Can you imagine living there and how you would feel about this? I mean, it's a heck of a situation. So I don't know the quarantine is going to be totally effective either. I think people are eventually going to break through, and it's a peninsula, as you can see. I'm not sure some of them are not going to be able to make a break for it somehow on boats or otherwise escape, like on a little paddleboard or surfboard that they kick out of there on a kickboard. They might just go for it if they're healthy enough, and they say, why should I stay here and wait for Ebola to get me? I'm going to make a run for it before. So I'm not sure the quarantine is going to be effective. In theory, that's what they're supposed to do is quarantine, but it's a heck of a situation. The other drastic measure, and I don't like to say this, if it gets bad enough, and we may see it headed this direction, don't be surprised if some of the governments, and I say this with real trepidation, this is not what I recommend, but they might get desperate enough, they might actually start to execute major numbers of their own people. And either through toxic gas or something like that, and try to blame it on some sort of accident or a terrorist incident or who knows what. But and that's a very drastic extreme. I don't recommend that. I think it's morally repugnant. but I think we may see some scary things like that occur. These mass village quarantines are going to turn into quasi-concentration camps, and you know the history on the concentration camps. This is a terrible thing. So we got to be careful about which way this thing's headed. And frankly, you know, we also made the prediction that the West and the developed, the wealthier nations were going to have to help the poor countries in a significant way in order to contain this thing. And that comment is now being echoed by MSF. This is Doctors Without Borders, or Médecins Sans Frontières, which is French phrase. But basically, they're saying the world leaders are failing to help over the Ebola outbreak. This is an article from yesterday, and that's exactly echoing our sentiment that we came out with about a month ago in on our recommendations, that the developed countries that are wealthier and have more resources are going to have to help out in a big way in order to contain this thing, and they're not doing it. And so that's its own problem. Vox got a good article on where Ebola is likely to break out. Basically, it's an analysis of where the flights go, and it's Europe is one of the main ones. It's in danger. Flights going out of Africa into Europe is a top destination, and that they are hugely at risk. I agree, and they're the next door continent over there. That in the Middle East. So 2 areas to watch. I think Latin America also is, because Latin America also has primitive sanitation in many places, and also a humid climate like sub-Saharan Africa. So I think those conditions make Latin and Central South America potentially ripe for an Ebola outbreak due to similar geography that they have, which is possibly an Ebola breeding ground. Other things we got to look at on this Ebola situation that are really serious are the increase in violence that we're seeing, and also the increase in the death toll. Just yesterday it was at 1,200, and today it's now at 1,350. And they're starting to estimate the numbers now. They don't even have a fix on them. Admittedly, these are very rounded type numbers that we're looking at. It was 1,200 and 1,350. They don't have a read on the death toll. Be sure to keep up with us on Twitter, and also see our website. We've got some recommendations on prepping and survivalism issues regarding Ebola, what you need to be doing. Forecastyear.com is our website, and then forecastyear on Twitter is our handle. Please follow us to stay up to date on what's happening and how you can get ready, and also what you need to do regarding political action, so that our leadership is fully engaged on this tragedy. You know, as things go, and we'll continue this thought later, but basically, one of the problems is that this area, sub-Saharan Africa, has got one of the fastest population growths in the world, and fertility rate is about 4 children per couple, 4 to 6. You look at the globalists and, you know, the New World Order types, they want to reduce population, not increase it. And I think they're complicit in the crime of letting this Ebola spread, certainly through Africa. Because as I see it, that they really want to thin out the population, especially in this region of the world, dramatically. And you're looking at a death rate of, you know, between 50 to 90% on this thing. That's a fast way to wipe out a bunch of people. Admittedly, a totally immoral thing to do, morally reprehensible, but it fits kind of their agenda. And that's kind of what I see happening here as to why the apathy and the lack of real response at the UN level and from the Western countries. They're also complicit in not sealing off the flights from this area, or having forced mandated quarantine times to see if people coming from this area have Ebola, which would be a common sense thing to do. And they're not doing it. And even though the adjacent countries like Nigeria and Kenya are starting to impose flight bans from these Ebola hit areas, the areas of Europe and North America are not doing that. And it's almost like they're complicit in allowing this thing to spread and encouraging it to spread. So the lack of responsibility among our leadership is significant. We need to get the word out and rally and raise the concern to our political leadership to take action in a responsible way, in a moral way, in a compassionate way, but also to take action early in a big way. Otherwise, this thing's going to really spiral out of control, and then it's going to be hard to contain it. So now's the time for us to take action on this thing in a big way, and hopefully we can turn the tide together. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more info. Again, check out our website, forecastyear.com, and see us on Twitter.